Hi, welcome to another episode of Unlocking Medicare with your host Tyrone Carr. Today we have another special guest. I'm excited to introduce Chris from Affinity Senior Care and Home Care Agency. And so again, we're excited to have Chris introduce himself and what you guys do. And we've known each other for about a year and a half now. And I'm just really excited to learn more about what you guys do and what services that you guys provide in our local community, and just helping our parents and kids as far as understand what home care does and what you guys provide as far as a service.
Thank you for having me on your show, Tyrone. I appreciate it. I know this is so important for a lot of family members to be able to kind of get those answers, and that's what I'm glad to hear, to help and provide value.
So, being I've been in the Medicare space for 17 years now, and I know that Medicare is overwhelming. It can be very complex for most individuals. So a lot of people just naturally assume as they transition into Medicare, whether someone who's turning 65 or maybe even someone that's older, that's 67, 7 years of age, and they've worked beyond the age of 65, and now they're transitioning to Medicare. Often we find that individuals think that Medicare is just going to cover the cost of a nursing home, assisted living, and they're surprised when they learn that it doesn't. So can you walk us through, in your experience, what that cost looks like, the services that are needed when it comes to home care, as far as that home care, as far as umbrella, and then we'll get to some of the questions that people have sent in.
Sure. This is a great question. A lot of family members sit in the hospital and they ask this, and they're usually too late. And sometimes they get their loved one or leaving the rehab, and it's a very stressful situation. So home health care is two branches. There's home health that's covered by your insurance when you have a doctor that has a script, and he's the captain of the ship in that type of scenario, where he's going to be able to find out what's going on with this person, and then find out what if they actually need RN or therapist. And this is called medical home health care, and that's covered by your insurance. So that is called home health. A lot of family members get that screwed up because there's also a private pay option, which is called caregiver services, and that's called private duty in the healthcare world, but really in layman terms it's caregiving, and that's more private pay. So home health care, when it's covered by your insurance, typically the one that's going to make that call is your physician writing a script and saying that you're going to be qualified for that. And then two is that the home health care has to accept your insurance. So if you have Medicare, for example, since we're here to talk about Medicare, all Medicare covers 100%. So if you have a Medicare, you should be able to get your home health care covered. So leaving the hospital, the rehab, or if you're at home and you want a nurse to come in or a therapist, your insurance should cover that. But it's always good to ask, if you select a home care company, if they accept your insurance, and they should do an insurance verification. And then they could tell you if sometimes you're in network or not network, or if maybe you might have a copay, and sometimes home health care companies cover those copays to get you covered 100%. Say you have like $100, $200 on there. Some companies will work with you on that to get it covered by insurance. So home health care typically is covered by your insurance, but make sure that you check with the home care provider and your doctor, do your due diligence, make sure that home care provider covers your insurance.
Now, do you see a difference between, original Medicare and someone who's got a Medigap policy? Do you see the differences in coverages versus somebody who has a Medicare Advantage? Because we're seeing more and more people that are leaning towards a Medicare Advantage versus traditional Medicare and a Medigap policy. From your perspective, can you give us some insight for viewers?
Yeah. Medicare Advantage is now becoming more aware that home health care is prevalent. And so they created plans out there to be able to customize family member what type of condition that they have. So Medicare traditionally, and all the Medicare Advantages, they've always covered home health care pretty well. But Medicare Advantage is becoming a little bit more aggressive on it because they realize that activities of daily living care is becoming more prevalent. The people who have Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's and MS, they need more care. So Medicare Advantages customizes them depending on their condition. So if someone has needs more daily care and wants someone to stay a little bit longer, what they want is when it's time for enrollment, you want to talk to Tyrone, and Tyrone, what he's going to do is he wants to figure out what you got going on in your life. As time goes on, you might need a Medicare Advantage to customize that you need care for longer periods of time, because Traditional Medicare does only cover home health care for, it's called intermediate care. An hour a nurse comes in or a therapist and they're done. And they're regulated by the insurance company by how many visits that they can go. So Medicare Advantage, they recognize that someone needs more long-term care depending on your chronic condition. So when you do get at that age and you have to decide, what type of Medicare plans, you have to see, like, what are your diagnoses, what's your history of possibly that you might need more longer-term care, and that's when you customize Medicare Advantage plans, and that's what they're trying to do in the future moving forward.
So if someone is, let's say someone who's transitioning into Medicare, let's say they're turning 65, and they have that, at that stage of the game, a person has, regardless of what their health issues are, whether they're some more severe than others, but that person has the availability of traditional Medicare along with the Medigap policy versus a Medicare Advantage. If someone has a lot of underlying health issues that is probably going to need of some home health care services, would you be more inclined, from your position dealing with the insurance carriers and the services that you guys offer and provide to the community, are you saying that the Advantage provides greater level of care is with less restrictions, if you're in the right one, of course, compared to original Medicare and a Medigap policy?
So Michigan is getting there, but other states have gotten there already. So we get these calls all the time. Does Medicare cover caregiving services? And the answer is now in Michigan is no, not yet. Other states, they do. So you will hear that Medicare Advantage, when it comes to Michigan, that they are going to cover more of a long-term basis. Like, someone to stay for 6, 8, 12 hours, whatever they qualify you for, they will tell you how many hours you're qualified for. So that's when Medicare Advantage we'll start to see in Michigan, where it becomes more of a home care providers will accept that. But yes, home health care is always going to be there, an option for you, but I would say in combination soon, instead of privately paying for caregiving services, insurance like Medicare Advantage and Medigap and all those, we're going to have some, just like how Medicaid has been doing this for decades. And they said that we'll send a nurse in, we'll say that we're going to have 10 hours or 100 hours a month covered. And then that amount of hours is utilized for your care. Or you can just have your loved one provide the care and Medicaid will pay you. So Medicare Advantage is going through an approval process. Soon Michigan will. It's not there yet. But they do have home health care advantages. And I would say you would have both. You can have the caretaker and the nurse and the therapist all coming in at one time. Now you're getting integrated wellness care and getting it covered by more insurance-wise. And then the private pay starts to be a little bit less. Now they're not going to cover it all. Even when your nurse and therapist leave and the insurance covers it, you still are left with two options, which is your family and friends and your support system is going to help you, or you're going to private pay for and get some covered, but not all. And then you're still going to have that gap where you have to still have some type of coverage. So it just depends.
So we know, as far as we look at original Medicare, covers the intermediate care, the skilled nursing care. But can you expand as far as on the home health care, those specific services that Medicare isn't going to cover, that person, no matter what class you're in, that they're going to be responsible for? Because that's what we want. We want people to understand what their exposures are, what they should do to prepare, so that way they're making the best informed decision as they transition, as they move forward.
And this is a great question, because we get this one a lot as well too. So when you're at home health care, a lot of family members, one they'll say is why did the care stop? We want to continue. And why can't we continue? So dementia and Parkinson, what happens is that if you cannot remember to do your daily routines, and if a therapist comes in and cannot remember, then Medicare stops their visits. So even if you're qualified for 30 days, it used to be 60, now it's 30 days. Between the 20th and 30th day, if the family members and our team and home health care team and the doctor, not the family is usually not involved, and they say, listen, you reached your goals, and then possibly they cannot remember to be able to continue on your own. We're going to educate the family, but we can't continue because that you don't qualify for the point of where you're going to reach your goals. So goals are so important in home health care, and so there are certain conditions where it's not qualified. Now, you moving forward into getting your hip and knee done and surgeries and all that, usually typically the insurance says hey, listen, you get your need on, you need to go back to outpatient, you need to be independent again. So if depending on your age, you don't have to have Medicare. You can just have any type of insurance. The insurance still will cut you off, and they'll say, hey, listen, 2 weeks therapy, that's the average in the United States. You need to go to outpatient therapy. And so usually the doctor makes that decision in a certain period of time where you continue or you don't. And sometimes family members get mad about that. They say, why can't we extend the care? And the only one that could extend your care is your doctor writing a script of necessity.
Is that for any particular service as far as writing a prescription for home care? Or does it have to be like each service that's rendered? So like if you're coming into the home to provide a service, whether it be administering medications, whether it's assisting with food, transferring from, a bed to a chair to a toilet, getting dressed, does each itemized service have to be written out in that prescription order for it?
So that's another question that is big too as well, so that's called caregiving services. A nurse and a therapist, sure, they're going to be humanistic and compassionate. They're going to come in and help you, but they only stay for an hour at a time. The bathing, the dressing, the medication reminders, the meal preparation, that light housekeeping, transferring if your lover's bedbound, if they're incontinent, if they are urinating and making bowel movements in the bed and wearing adult diapers. So this is called private duty caregiver services. We call it home care. It is separate than home health care. It's a whole nother type of care. Medicare doesn't cover that, and so that's a private pay option. So your nurse will be compassionate; they'll do as much as they can when they're there. But that's why home health care is called intermediate. The doctor is coming in for medical care for a specific scope to reach a goal for you to be independent, so you can go on with your daily living. Caregiving, home care, private duty services, the private pay option, which I'm talking about now, that you might not reach independence anymore. Where you slowly, progressively decline. And that's where you need more assistance. If you're a fall risk and you're at home, or if you're bedbound, that difference is a big thing right now that not a lot of people know. They just think they hear home care and then they classify home health care as being the same. But it's not.
So does Affinity Senior Home Health Care, do you guys help determine what's going to be covered underneath? So let's say we refer a client to your agency. Mm-hmm. Do you guys help determine what's going to fall underneath Medicare, their Medicare Advantage, and then versus this is what they're going to pay in private duty costs, so that way they have a realistic idea of what that cost is going to be, whether it be on a monthly, 6 months basis, or even a year? Yeah. Do you guys help with that process?
Yeah, and so when you think you need it, what we do is we send out a nurse and do an assessment. And the nurse can't come in unless the doctor writes a script. And also, if they think that you need caregiving services, then our team does that too. We have that same service on hand. And so that way the nurse and the caregiver can train each other and talk to each other about the daily routine that needs to be done. And that's really the scope of really what's important, is we can provide both care. So if the nurse comes in or the therapist feels like they need a little bit more assistance, then we'll do a separate assessment. It's still a different assessment. You will talk to our caregiving team, because we have to ask you different questions regarding what is going on in a daily life, so that way we can incorporate that. And main goal is to keep them safe in their home. And if they want to go all the way to the end of life care and stay in their home, then there has to be a plan. And that's what we do.
So one of the things I do as far as an agency, first I'll ask, what questions do you have? We want to make sure that we address those. But in addition to that, these are some of the additional questions that you should be asking. For the viewers, the people that have a loved one that is in need of home health services, what are some of the questions, some of the things that they should avoid as they're looking into this next chapter of life?
Be patient on them and take initiative to understand what your long-term goals are and set up the right team and collaborate with guys like me and Tyrone, and we have a senior resource group, and educate about what's out there. Develop a relationship with care providers, so that way one day when you have to make a decision, the most stressful situation is when you have to make a situation on the fly. And that's why I would advise that family members is develop a relationship with people in the community that you can trust, so that way you can have your questions answered and set it up. When you're leaving the hospital, that's one thing I would just advise right now, is that if you have surgery set up, if you have rehab center and you're about to go home, don't wait to go home to even set up any care or talk to a professional about it. When you're in the moment, I always say the first day that you know that possibly you're going to need more assistance in the home, that's when you start researching. Don't wait for it. And being at home, you have to set it up right too as well. You have to make it safe. You have to have home modifications. You have to make sure your insurance is going to be right to cover everything before. That's why you meet with your Medicare specialist, when it's time for enrollment. And if you possibly have a history of things going on in your life that you need to concentrate on, is that setting your loved one up right with the care at home. And that's what a lot of people do, is that they don't have the right insurance, and then they're searching for the right home care company, and the one in their community might even not accept their insurance. And that a lot of family members I see get hurt on that. They'll call us and they'll say, hey, we want to use you guys, and we check their insurance and we don't accept it. And then they have to go use some other company we're not aware of. So do your due diligence and make sure you start ahead of time.
Yeah, I think it's important that, as an agent advisor, you're not only asking the questions that pertain to what their life looks like right now, but understanding the family history as well, because that could be telling to what their future may hold and what types of additional exposures they could have potentially, just by understanding what the family history is and just bringing certain things to their attention, so that way they're more informed and educated about what may transpire in the future that may be greater cost to them, that they could be prepared for in the unfortunate event that something does happen. So some of the questions, Chris, that some clients had sent in. So are there state requirements for home care providers, and do most agencies do background checks?
So if you're home health care, you have to be licensed by the state. That's just how it is. You usually have your JACO approved or your chapter approved, or the state of Michigan comes in and every 3 years they come in and they audit the chart. So if you're home health care, it's mandatory. If you're private duty caregiver services in Michigan, it's not mandatory to be licensed. Background checks and drug screens, I surely hope that if you're going to hire a company that you ask that question, because they have to. Now, there's companies that don't, steer away from them. So that should be mandatory on one of the questions, how to choose a home care company.
Now, there are certain questions they should ask. So let's say someone, outside of Affinity Senior Care and home care, are there questions that you would tell somebody, this is what they should be asking an agency if they're looking to do business with them, just to be aware that doesn't have to be disclosed?
Yes. We have a guide. We give it free to everyone, and it's how to choose the right home care company. You don't have to choose us. We don't care if you do. You need to ask the right questions when you're out vetting any provider. One is, if they're background check, do they drug screen? Do they hire their employees virtually, or do they hire them in person? Do they have 24/7 access to the home care company? If they call that number, are they going to answer? That's important, and it doesn't matter what company it is. You should be able to get your questions answered in a critical situation. Are they licensed? Is important, yeah. And so if they're not licensed, that's fine. If they're a caregiving company, most aren't. But if they don't, do they have a registered nurse on staff to answer questions as well too? And then their skill sets. Ask what type of employees do they hire, and what are the requirements when they hire them. You want to know what the process is to be part of an organization. For us, we set a standard. We're family owned. We're not going to settle for less. And if there is care that's not provided right, it's not going to happen for very long, because we're super involved. We're inundated on making sure that customer service and clients are happy, and as well as our employees too. If they're not happy, we tackle it right away and we figure out a solution. So that's important. You want to know the culture of the organization. Go on their website, go see what they're doing. If they're super involved in the community, I don't think that anybody wants to be embarrassed on their reputation. So if you could see a company that's out there and doing things, that means that they're willing to put their name on the line.
Okay. So another question we have from a client: do you need to use a hospice company, or will home care companies provide it?
So you'll find some home health care companies also have a hospice wing. And so if you do, then your home health care and your hospice can be intercorrelated with each other. Now, there's lots of hospice companies that are standalone, that are just hospice, and then there's some hospice companies that have palliative care and hospice. So it just depends. Usually you transition. Typically, when you have home health care, if you're chronic condition, then we would recommend a hospice company. So
can you speak to the difference between, to your level of knowledge, between what hospice, home care, and palliative care, so that way people understand the difference between the three?
Yeah, great question. So, we talked about a lot about home health care. Home health care, your doctor's involved, he writes a script. It's short-term care, reaching goals, and a nurse and a therapist and home health aides could be covered by insurance. Now, hospice care, the word is more freely explained now and not as bad as talking about someone passing away with hospice. You don't have to be passing away tomorrow or next month to be qualified for it, but insurance does cover it. All your medical supplies cover it, and typically what happens is you can't seek care at that point in time, which is you can't seek treatment. And when you're seeking treatment, that's when they start to see, like, you do qualify for hospice. Let's make your life comfortable as possible, and your doctor does write a script for that. Okay, so insurance is involved and the doctor is involved. And typically, right when you transfer to a hospice company, they do have a physician on board. They have a director of nursing on board, and your care now starts to be transitioned with their physician, their nurses, to make sure that you have a good quality of life and the care that needed. But with palliative care, it's one step before hospice, and you can still seek treatment at palliative care, but you have a nurse practitioner that's going to be on board with you. So a nurse practitioner, you still have the director of nursing, you have the whole hospice support, and insurance does cover it as well too. But it's a little bit less leniency where they'll say, hey, listen, you're not taking chemo anymore, you're not taking treatment to be able to fix that chronic condition that you have. That's the difference between palliative care. It's more comfortable, keeping you comfortable. And they do add a little bit of caregiving services as well too. The aide comes in, helps with the meals and dressing and bathing and all that. And so making you comfortable as possible, but the insurance is a little bit less stringent on the qualifications.
So who determines what's home care versus palliative care?
The best is your doctor. If you have a good relationship with him and the hospice company, and the one that you choose and you're gonna select, your physician your primary doctor specifically, or if it's your oncologist or whatever condition that you have a great relationship with him, obviously, and he should guide you in the right direction. They're very knowledgeable of it. They do it all the time, and they should be able to know what stage you are at this point in time. That's, and obviously have your family involved. If there's family with power of attorneys and they're involved as well, have them have a meeting with your physician and decide, like, this is our decisions. We have to make a choice. And it's okay to go from palliative to hospice. And a lot of people transition. You can go back and forth too. Even with home health care, there's people that they call it graduation. They can graduate from hospice, and they've done treatment, they receive the care through hospice, but then they say, hey, listen, looks like there's going to be a long-term lifespan now. Let's graduate from hospice and let's have more therapy services. So, because usually hospice doesn't offer the therapy and the range of motion and the exercises, so you can actually graduate and go back to hospice. Your doctor can write you a home health care script and go back to having therapy come in. And a lot of people don't know that. You actually can go back.
Yeah, I just always, when you think of hospice, I always understood the term
prior to knowing,
like, yeah, you're passed away. Like, you typically, your days are numbered, essentially.
Yeah.
Not realizing, as the more I learned about it, that definition is very broad in the sense of what it really actually means. And so,
yeah, you don't have to be passing away. There is a chronic condition that you currently have, and a lot of people go back in readmission, or there's miracles. There's tons of miracles in life where people actually start to like, this is not a condition where you're actually going to pass away. You could live another X amount of years, and you don't have to be on hospice anymore. And they can, have to be on all those meds that they recommend for hospice, and you can go back to being on home health care, and your primary care doctor can work with you on your treatment.
I just find this stuff so fascinating. It's and helpful as well. So here's a question we have from a viewer or a client. Is there a limit on how long you can be in hospice before insurance will no longer cover it?
No, hospice will take you to end of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and also all your supplies. Medicare will cover medical supplies, and it's good to know what medical supplies, because you definitely don't want to get that walker and then you never got the hospital bed and you have to privately pay for the hospital bed. But when you go on hospice, there's a lot of advantages to that too as well. Is that expense to you now is the hospice, most hospice companies and all, you cover it all. for you and make sure that they give you everything that you need during that period of time.
So with Affinity, do you guys just focus just on the home care? Do you guys provide palliative care? Do you guys have hospice service that you guys provide, or just strictly just home care?
But home health care and private duty caregivers is our niche.
Okay.
Yep.
And what would you say is the average cost for home care, private duty?
I would just say you can do the math. It's $30 per hour if you get standard care. It's $25 if you want around the clock care. So if you want 4, 6, 12, or just 24/7 care, you just times that by the rate. So if it's $30, if you need our minimum amount of care, it's 3 days a week, 4-hour minimum shifts, and then that would be just your bare minimum, and that's times the rate. So that's when we talk about family members is long-term care insurance policies. Talk to us about that. We're carriers. We can make sure that we can work with the carrier and you get that covered as well too. If you're a veteran, we can help you with your veteran benefits. That helps cover caregiving services. You're involved in an auto accident. This covers any type of care depending on the situation and working with a case management group. But that can be also your care can be covered as well. If there were to be hospice, we would refer that out. But we work with very preferred providers and make sure you're taken care of. And also with home health care. And I'm not here to say that it's important to use us. We have great partners that if we can't cover services that we would recommend you to.
The services that you guys provide, will you guys do a free consultation?
Completely free. Yeah, and that's one question you need to ask too when you vetting companies is do they charge you for a consultation? And I would no, we don't charge you to answer your questions.
If someone has a specific budget, you guys are willing to work with inside of that budget as far as what's conducive to what they can afford, and maybe a certain care as far as home care may be better served to have this taken care of versus maybe not having this service necessarily met.
Yeah, I really tell family members about this one is that we're going to make a humanistic decision as if it's our own family member, and that comes down to, this is just one that a lot of family members, I always tell them, I'm transparent with them. They call and say, hey, I want around-the-clock care. I'm like, do you know how much that costs? Let me ask you one question. Does your loved one sleep at night? Are they a fall risk? Are they sleeping throughout the night and everything is fine? Then you don't need night care. That's 12 hours a day that possibly if you have someone there with them that you could save on that. And I would gradually start with see if 8 to 10 and gradually go over time to see if you need more of that care. You have to look at the condition of your loved one. You have to look at are they at risk? Do they have bowel movements and urinate in the middle of the night? Do they try to get up? Are they at fall risk? Are they wandering throughout the night? They like to wander with Alzheimer's and dementia. That happens all the time. So there's periods of the day where they're safe. Then you don't need care as long as somebody is there and understands what care what they need, their daily needs are.
One of the things that, doing the Medicare seminars, I always suggest, education. And when we're thinking of Medicare, we're thinking of, I got to choose a drug plan or a traditional Medicare with a Medigap, or I have to decide if I want to choose a Medicare Advantage. Not realizing that Medicare, it's like a spider web, or has a bunch of tentacles, and it touches so many different areas of life. Ask your assets, and if you don't have that basic foundation in place, you can't even begin to wrap your head around the idea of what type of exposure you have. So, and if you're not educated, you're not informed, then you can't make an educated decision. So one of the things that we always emphasize, make certain that you understand what Medicare covers or what it doesn't cover in the sense of home care, nursing home, assisted living facility, because people just naturally assume. So there's things that you can do to protect yourself. So in the event that something does happen, an unfortunate event, or you're diagnosed with some disease, or maybe that you have a family history of something that's hereditary, and that later in life, you might be exposed to that and dealing with that, and that's a real life situation. So now you're paying out of pocket for something. Otherwise, if you're just prepared properly, you could have avoided paying all this money out of pocket. It would have been a lot easier to manage that way. So,
and a good scenario I would say for you is if you're meeting with Tyrone and you need Medicare, is that find out what your Medicare providers in your local area and vet them and make sure that that's what you want. Because you might have an HMO or PPO, and you might be a network, and you can't use certain home care companies or Blue Care Network, Cofinity, Aetna, Humana. There's a lot of home care providers that don't accept that insurance. Yep. Or if you have a HAP, you have to use Henry Ford, then the other home care provider has to be with HAP. The company that you truly want and the insurance that you pick matters.
Yeah, no, it does. And I mean, even when it comes to physical therapy or chiropractic coverage, I mean, depending what care you may be using now currently, people just aren't asking the right questions. And unfortunately, a lot of agents, advisors, they're not sharing a lot of the information that you need to be aware of. Reasons behind that, I don't know. I have a lot of different reasons why I believe that is. But again, those are the things that we do, is make sure that we're addressing the questions, concerns that you have, and then saying, these are the additional questions that you need to be asking, so that way you're properly educated and informed to empowered to make an informed decision.
Yeah, and the greatest thing about it is you have podcast shows, YouTube, social media, to be able to get educated on your selection of what you want before you make a decision.
Well, I appreciate you, Chris, joining the show today, and I thank our viewers for watching another episode of Unlocking Medicare with Tyrone Carr. And again, thanks to Chris and Affinity Senior Home and Healthcare. And we'll have his information on this video as well. So if you want to reach out to him directly, and if not, you can also reach out to us and we can put you in contact with his organization. And if you enjoyed learning more about what Medicare touches on, and we're getting into the micro as far as Medicare, please subscribe to the button below and look for our upcoming videos that will be posted Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And again, thank you for watching this video, and have a great day.